Millions of Americans facing a midnight deadline to file their tax returns. A conservative watchdog group reportedly sent a memo to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent with the subject line, Democrats abuse power in IRS to entrench partisanship. The memo, reported by the Washington Examiner, reads, over 60% of IRS leadership have outwardly supported Democratic politicians or liberal policies. It also says none of the leadership has supported Republicans or conservatives. Charles Payne, host of Making Money on Fox Business, joins me in just a moment to talk about all of this. First, though, let's scoop up more information. Fox Business's Hillary Vaughn on Capitol Hill. Hillary.
Hi, Harris. Well, most Americans did have to write a big fat check to the government today to pay their taxes, but over 100,000 federal workers are not paying their taxes on time. In 2021, the IRS found that almost 150,000 federal workers owe about $1.5 billion in unpaid taxes. Over 5,000 of them work at the IRS and owe $50 million in overdue taxes. Senator Joni Ernst introducing several bills aimed at cleaning up the IRS. One bill would require IRS employees to be audited every year and fired if they don't pay their taxes. Another bill would sell off the IRS's weapons stockpile. It has spent about $10 million taxpayer dollars buying guns and ammo, stockpiling 4,500 guns, 5 million rounds of ammo, even 15 machine guns. Ernst says it's time to sell that stockpile off to pay down the debt, helping DOJ's mission. So far, DOJ has saved taxpayers $155 billion and counting.
I think the American people are disgusted by the waste they're seeing of their tax dollars, especially on a day like today, April 15th, when they're writing those checks to the federal Treasury, to know that that money's not all going to help keep our country strong with a national defense, but it's going to waste money.
It's not just wasteful, Harris. It also may not be safe for IRS special agents to be armed. An investigation found that at one point, IRS special agents fired their weapons accidentally more than they did intentionally. Harris?
Goodness. Wow. All right. Hillary, thank you. In focus now, Charles Payne, host of Making Money on Fox Business. So, welcome. I want to hit you with 2 points. First of all, why did they get away with owing that much money?
I guess they write a note. You know where I work, I'll get it to you. I don't know. It's like, it really is amazing. It's one of the reasons why we're so frustrated with all of this in general. Like there's just two sets of rules. Right? And that's another one of the fringe benefits being insulated by the federal government.
Talk to me about the gun situation. Now, this is not connected to Americans' right to buy guns. This is, the way I'm understanding it, it's for that agency and those people who work there. Why?
Well, they have a small division, criminal investigation division.
Yes.
But I think when Biden was talking about expanding 87,000 more agents, obviously part of that was to intimidate folks. And I think they were going to deputize a whole lot more agents and, to go beyond the scope, obviously, that they have right now, which is very small. You go somewhere, a large firm, you may get a blank warrant, right? In the Postal Service, they'll have someone there with guns, and IRS will have someone with guns, and, Department of Treasury, and so on and so forth. But those are unique instances. I think they were planning something much bigger on a more regular scale for smaller businesses.
Wow. Well, self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders took the stage at Coachella Saturday. Who had that on their bingo card? He ranted about President Trump and billionaires in front of a crowd that spends a lot of cash to be there.
This country faces some very difficult challenges. We need you to stand up to fight for justice. To fight for economic justice, social justice, and racial justice.
All right, so he wasn't like the top musical name to go. They had planned to spend this money anyway, but we just want to show you how much they did spend. General admission to the concert alone, $600. VIP tickets, nearly $1,200. Factor in accommodations, meals, and drinks. A lot of people travel. That adds on hundreds, if not thousands. Joe Concha has some strong feelings about this.
Bernie Sanders goes there as well, I guess, to appeal to the working man and woman, the same senator who owns 3 homes and is worth millions of dollars. So the hypocrisy is so pure. That's Bernie's audience. Yeah, and then we heard his partner in crime, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, just last week, flying to a Fight the Oligarchy rally. flew first class. This is something where the Democratic Party really has some problems right now because Donald Trump has co-opted the very voters that used to reliably vote Democrat.
Well, look, a new opinion piece has this headline: of all the things to go into debt for, these Americans choose the dumbest possible thing. Here's part of it. How desperate and stupid do you have to be if you are willing to go into debt for a concert? Our culture is so rotten that instead of looking for a way to get married, buy a home, start a real life, 20-somethings are willing to ruin their financial future over Lady Gaga. Look, we're talking about the fact, the reports now that people have taken out loans. They are seriously going into debt to go see the concert. And, you know, Sanders is just one of the names added to the bill. And that audience is huge. I don't know if they, care that he's there.
They're huge. They didn't come to see him, but he came to see them, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's his focus is on: young, ideological, not really understanding what's going on in the world. There used to be an old saying: if you're not progressive or liberal when you're 20s, you don't have a heart. If you're not conservative and fiscally conservative when you're in your 40s, you don't have a brain, right? So, I mean, it's an old saying, but it just goes, they haven't lived life. So, yeah, these things sound wonderful. But how do we get in this predicament in the first place? We transferred from a nation of rugged individualism that became the #1 country in the world. And over a period of time, beginning with the Great Depression, we lost a lot of that. In the 60s and 70s is when the nail was put in the coffin, because big government became bigger and they would solve every single problem, every nuance, every social slight. And they've been running on that. You can find videos of Bernie Sanders, the greatest hits, saying the same speech over and over again for at least 25 years. And it's a recruitment. It's not even about a plan to do anything. It's just a recruiting tool for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and I don't know how much you can really rev up an audience about politics. I believe there are some alcoholic beverages, perhaps. I don't know what the crowd's been on, but it's nighttime. They spent all that money, went into debt to get there. They're partying. Woohoo! And a politician shows up on stage. They probably clap for anybody just hoping he gets off. I don't even know if they know who he is at that point. They're having fun.
No, they're having fun. And again, they feel like, okay, this is they learn about fairness. That's the main thing they've been learning about, and then their minds, what he's saying sounds right. It sounds fair.
I hear you.
Then they learn history. Then they start writing bills. And then all of a sudden they start getting a check. And who is this FICO person getting a big piece of my action? Real life kicks in.
Wow. I wrote down rugged individualism.
Yeah.
That's where we came from. That was the driver. And what do we have now?
Big government, I call it the dependency class. It's a placated dependency class. They get just enough to go ahead and finance a concert. You can actually use Klarna, buy now, pay later for DoorDash. Now, how absurd is that? Again, you take a meal that if you walk down to McDonald's yourself and spend $10, now it's a $40 meal after you paid the fees for DoorDash and after you pay the interest for Klarna. This is just how backwards this is. Whoever wrote that op-ed is right. They're sacrificing their entire life, their future, their economic future, to live in a moment.
Well, it's a good thing they still have us. We'll hold them by the hand. We love them.
We will.
That younger generation, just sober up after the concert. Charles, good to see you.
You too. Thanks.